"And the child goes on to Fallowgate in the morning," said Mr. Craddock. "The carriage is ordered for 9. Georgiana Lanbridge had landed at Bristol before daylight and been on the road ever since. She had been at Eagleridge for 1 hour. She stood in the stone hall with her bonnet still on, because no one had thought to ask her for it. She looked at the man of business. In 4 months of travelling, she had got the whole thing wrong. "To Fallowgate," she said, to Mrs. Bracewell. "The lady is the nearest connection of the late Lord Alban on the English side, and she has a house near Ludlow, and she has offered." Mr. Craddock consulted his pocket-book, as though the answer to everything were kept in it. "It is a very proper offer. The house is warm. There is a woman there who was nurse to Mrs. Bracewell's own boys." "And I am to go where?" "Wherever you please, Miss Lanbridge." He said it kindly. That was the part she remembered afterwards, that he said it kindly. "The estate will, of course, pay your journey. There are 2 guineas set aside for you. The Ludlow mail passes at noon." Behind her, on the oak settle by the cold hearth, the child slept under Georgiana's travelling cloak. 6 years old, and small for it. She had slept that way for 9 weeks, in a felucca off Messina, in a transport with a hold that smelled of tar and oranges, in 4 inns, and 1 lighthouse, and 1 dry ditch outside Lisbon. She slept with 1 fist closed in the wool. Even asleep, she did not let go of the wool. Georgiana turned back to the man of business. "No," she said. Mr. Craddock blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "She has not spoken since Palermo. She eats when I eat, and only then. She sleeps when I am within reach of her hand." Georgiana kept her voice low, for the child and the lowness made it sound calmer than she was. "If you put her in a carriage at 9 o'clock tomorrow with a nurse she has never seen, she will not cry. That is what you are counting on. She will simply stop. Miss Lanbridge, I carried her 9 weeks. I promised her mother. I will give her to the person who has the right to her, and to no one else, and I will see the room she is to sleep in first." There was a silence in the hall. The house was very cold. Eagleridge had been built out of the grey stone it stood on, and in February it gave nothing back. "The right to her," said a voice from the passage, "is what 4 attorneys are presently being paid to discover." She had not heard him come in. He had come through the kitchen court. He was wet to the thigh, with river mud on him past the knee, and he was pulling off a glove finger by finger, as though the work required all his attention. He was tall, black hair soaked flat, a face that gave a stranger nothing, and had plainly been giving strangers nothing for years. Mr. Craddock straightened. "Your Grace, I did not expect. The weir at the mill went at 4 o'clock. Half the meadow is under water." He looked at the settle, at the shape under the cloak, and something went across his face and was gone before it could be named. "This is my brother's daughter." It was not a question. Georgiana answered it anyway. "This is Colette. She is 6 years and 2 months. Her mother was Matilda Obrio, of Marseille, who married Lord Alban Stanbury in Palermo on the 11th of April, 1806, in the chapel of the Annunziata, before 2 witnesses. She said it the way one recites a thing that has had to be true out loud in 5 ports. The fever took her father in September. It took her mother in October. She has been mine since the 22nd of October, and I have not put her down since. Wallace, Duke of Ambermere, looked at her for the first time. Deep blue eyes. Not warm, not cruel either, That was the thing she noticed, and she had learned in the last year to notice it quickly. Cold and cruel are not the same country. "You are the companion," he said. I was her mother's reader. My father was chaplain to the consulate at Palermo until he died. I stayed because there was no money to come home with, and then I stayed because she asked me to. Who asked you? Matilda. Georgiana's chin came up half an inch. 2 days before the end. She asked me in French, because she had no English left by then. I told her yes. And the papers? In the box. The register extract, the passport, 3 letters. She paused. And 1 letter besides, which is not in the box, and which I will not give to Mr. Craddock. Mr. Craddock made an unhappy noise. "Why not?" said the Duke. "Because it is addressed to you. Because it is in French, and I have not yet met an Englishman on this journey who could read it without deciding what it ought to say." For a moment nobody moved. The rain went on, hitting the hall window in the dark. Then the Duke dropped his glove on the table with the rest of the wet things, and said to Craddock, without any particular emphasis, "Cancel the carriage. Your Grace, Mrs. Bracewell will have been told. Then she will be told again." He was already walking towards the stairs. Halfway there he stopped, one hand on the newel post, and spoke without turning round. "Miss Lanbridge, there is a room next to the old nursery. It has not been used since I was 9 years old, and Mrs. Cobbold will tell you it is damp, and she will be right. You may have it until the court says otherwise." "Thank you." "Do not thank me." A pause, the flat voice going flatter. "I have not done you a kindness. I have made you a witness." He went up. She heard a door somewhere above, closing without violence, which she would learn was the only way doors were closed in that house. Colette had woken. She did not sit up. She lay under the cloak with her eyes open, watching the ceiling of a country she had never asked to see. Georgiana knelt beside the settle. The small fist came out of the wool and took 2 of her fingers and held them. The child said nothing at all. The room next to the nursery was damp. Mrs. Cobbold said so twice, with the particular satisfaction of a housekeeper whose warnings have been ignored. Then she lit the fire herself, stayed to see it draw, and brought up bread and milk without being asked. Georgiana learned the household in 3 days, because that was what she did. She learned that Mrs. Cobbold had been at Eagleridge 41 years, that Tarrant the butler had a bad knee he never mentioned, that the Duke rose at 5 and was out of the house by past, that he came in at dusk with the day's mud on him, that there had been no Duchess, that there had been, in the whole of the last 3 years, no visitors at all except attorneys. The estate was not ruined, but it had been. Ambermere had come to Wallace 3 years before, sideways, from a cousin who had spent 40 years, proving that a great fortune can be argued away by degrees. The timber was gone. The mill was mortgaged. 2 farms had been let go entirely. What was left, the Duke had spent 3 years dragging back out of the water by hand. It showed on him. It showed in the mud, in the accounts he did himself at midnight, in the way he stood at a window looking at his own fields as though they had personally insulted him. None of it was said to her. She learned it the way she had learned Italian, by standing still in rooms where people were talking about something else. Colette did not speak. She ate, if Georgiana ate first. She let herself be dressed. On the fourth morning, she followed a housemaid to the window and stood looking at the wet park for an hour. When Georgiana came, the child pointed at the sheep on the hill and looked up. "Mouton," Georgiana said. "Sheep." Colette mouthed the English word without any sound coming out of it. Then she went back to the window. She had a great deal of language, Georgiana told the housekeeper. She had 3. She has put them all down somewhere, and she will pick them up when she believes the ground will hold. Mrs. Cobbold wiped the sill with her apron and said, "Poor mite," and then, after a moment, "And the poor man." On the 6th day, a chaise came up the avenue at noon. A small, upright old woman got out of it in black, refused all assistance, and came into the hall demanding tea, a fire, and her nephew, in that order. "You are the girl from Sicily," said Lady Temperance Stanbury. "I am, ma'am." "Sit down. You are too thin, and you are standing like a soldier. I am his aunt. I have been in Bath since Christmas being useless, and I have come home to be useful, which nobody enjoys." She looked Georgiana over once, thoroughly, and did not pretend she was doing anything else. "How old are you?" 22. "That is a pity. 22 is exactly the age nobody in a court of law will forgive you for." She sat down by the fire. "Do you know what is being done to that child in London, while you are teaching her the English for sheep?" "I know there is a petition." "You know nothing? Sit down. I am going to be unpleasant, and it will go easier for both of us if you are seated." Lady Temperance took off her gloves, finger by finger, and Georgiana thought, with a small jolt, that the gesture was exactly her nephew's. Mrs. Ophelia Bracewell has moved in Chancery to be made the guardian of my great-niece. She has a solicitor, a memorial 30 pages long, and a great many friends who dine well. Her case is this. Item, that the marriage in Palermo is not proved to English satisfaction, so that the child is either Lady Colette Stanbury, or she is nobody at all, and until that is settled, she is a ward of the court. Item, that the property her mother's people left in Marseille will come to her when she is of age. That, in the meantime, somebody must have the management of it, with an allowance out of it for her keep. And item 3, said Georgiana quietly. You are quicker than you look. Item 3, that His Grace of Ambermere is a bachelor of 30, living alone in a wet county, with no lady in the house. That the only woman in the establishment is a girl of 22. No family, no fortune, no character in England that anybody can vouch for. Lady Temperance held her hands to the fire. She does not say it coarsely. She would never say it coarsely. She writes that she is concerned for the delicacy of the arrangement. That is how a woman with a good dressmaker cuts your throat. Georgiana sat very still. There is a remedy, she said at last. There is. Every attorney in the case has already named it, twice in writing, in the tone of men who believe they have thought of something clever. The old woman's mouth was thin. A wife. Give the master a duchess, and a nursery, and a married household, and the delicacy of the arrangement evaporates like a puddle in July. Mrs. Bracewell's whole memorial goes into the fire. And is there a lady? There is not. There has not been for 3 years, because my nephew's notion of society is a drainage plan and a candle. Lady Temperance looked at her sideways. There is, however, a young woman living in his house who has carried the child across Europe, who can read every document in the case in the original, and to whom the child clings like a burr. Craddock has noticed it. Craddock is not a subtle man, He put it in a letter. The fire cracked. Somewhere upstairs a shutter was being fastened. "I am the child's servant," said Georgiana. "Not her price." "Good," said Lady Temperance. "Say it in that voice when it matters, and never once say it to him." That night, Colette woke at 10, and would not settle. There was no milk in the nursery jug. Georgiana went down with a candle in her hand, and her shawl over her nightgown. That was how it happened. The study door stood a hand's breadth open on the passage. There was firelight in the gap. She heard Tarrant's voice first, low and careful, the voice of a servant who has said the same thing 3 times already. "Only that the gentlemen are agreed on it, Your Grace. It is Mr. Craddock's opinion and Mr. Bramston's, and if I may say so, it is Lady Temperance's." And then the Duke's voice, quite clearly from beside the fire. "I know what it is. I have had it in 3 letters this week." A chair moved. "Let them keep their opinion. I'd rather be ruined than marry her." Georgiana stopped in the passage. The candle did not shake, because she did not permit it to. She stood with the cold flags under her bare feet, and the door open a hand's breadth in front of her, and she waited to hear whatever came next. What came next was the outer door of the study, on the garden side, opening and shutting. He had gone out into the February night, the way he did, and Tarrant would come through the passage in a moment carrying the tray. She went back up the stairs with the empty jug in her hand. Colette was awake and waiting. She sat up in the middle of the big bed, in a room that had been shut for 21 years, holding out both arms. Georgiana got in beside her and held her. She spoke in French, because the French was all the child had left. "Doors, mon coeur. I am here. I am not going anywhere." She lay awake a long time. It was not the sentence. She had been the poor relation at other people's tables. She knew what she was worth on the open market, and she had never once mistaken herself for a bargain. It was the ease of it. He had said it to a butler, in the tone a man uses about a thing already decided, at 10 o'clock at night, in a house where she had been given a damp room and told she was a witness. "I'd rather be ruined than marry her." "Very well," she thought, watching the ceiling. "Then we shall neither of us be ruined. And I will not be married. And that child will keep her name if I have to fetch it out of Sicily myself." It was the first of her decisions, and she made it on her back in the dark. And in the morning she got up and made a list. The list had 4 things on it, and she wrote them in her father's small, clear hand on the back of a used sheet, because paper cost money. 1, terms. 2, the register. 3, the witnesses. 4, the letter. She began with the terms, because it was the only one she could do before breakfast. She waited in the passage outside the estate room until 7:30, and when he came through with his hat in his hand, she stepped out and said, "Your Grace, 5 minutes." He stopped. He had a way of stopping entirely, without shifting his weight, that made other people feel hurried. "Miss Lanbridge, I am living in your house and eating your bread, and there is no name for what I am." She held out the sheet. "That is inconvenient for you in a court of law, and it is intolerable to me everywhere else. I have written what I propose. Governess and companion to Lady Colette Stanbury. £30 the year, paid quarterly, the first quarter in advance. A month's notice on either side. My own hours after 7 o'clock in the evening for my own work." He read it, standing in the doorway with the light behind him. "Your own work," he said. "I translate. French and Italian, and Greek if the gentleman is patient. There is a bookseller in London who paid my father for 20 years and will pay me at a lower rate for the same hours. I intend to be paid for something. £30 is low. £30 is what I am worth in England without a character from anybody. Do not improve it. If you improve it, Mrs. Bracewell's attorney will call it a settlement. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. It did not become anything. You have thought about her attorney. I have thought about very little else since Tuesday. He took the sheet to the estate room table, dipped the pen, and signed at the bottom without sitting down. Then he wrote something else underneath, and blotted it, and gave it back to her. Under her 4 clauses, he had written, in a hard, upright hand, "Agreed, W. Ambermere." And beneath that, the 7th clause of any agreement is that either party may say what they think without penalty. That is not usual. I find it saves time. She looked at it a long moment. There are only 4 clauses, Your Grace. Then there is room. He went out to the flooded meadow, and she went up and taught a silent child the English for window, floor, fire, bread, and none of them came back to her out loud. The register extract was a copy, and that was the trouble. She had it out on the nursery table by 10, waited at the corners with a candlestick, a hairbrush, and 2 pebbles Colette had carried from a beach near Trapani, and would not be parted from. It was a fair copy of the entry made out by the priest of the Annunziata at Palermo, dated the 11th of April, 1806. It named Alban Stanbury, gentleman of England, and Mathilde Aubrio, spinster of Marseille. It named the officiating priest. It named 2 witnesses, Giacomo Riva, merchant of the Via Alloro, R. Wilkin, clerk to His Majesty's consul. It was clear, it was regular, and it was worth nothing at all, because it carried no notarial seal and no consular certificate. She had begged it out of a clerk in a hurry, in a city where 3,000 people were dying of the fever, and she had thought at the time that she was being thorough. She had been a child of 21 with a dead employer and a live one in her arms. She wrote to Mr. Bramston in London that afternoon, 4 pages, and set out exactly what was wrong with the paper and exactly what would cure it. A certified extract under the seal of the parish and the hand of the consul. Failing that, the sworn deposition of a witness. Failing that, the priest himself, who was 71 in 1806, and would very likely be dead. Then she sat with the pen in her hand, and thought about R. Wilkin, clerk, an Englishman who had stood in a side chapel in Palermo on a hot morning, and signed his name to somebody else's happiness. He would be somewhere. Englishmen are always somewhere. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Mrs. Ophelia Bracewell came to call on the last Tuesday in February. She came in a hired chaise with a footman who had been hired with it, and she brought a jar of quince preserve and a doll. She was perhaps 50, with a fine complexion kept up carefully, and she was dressed in the sort of half-mourning that stops being mourning and becomes a costume. She was, Georgiana thought, the best-mannered woman she had ever met. My dear Miss Lanbridge, you must be so very tired. Not at all, ma'am. You must be. 9 weeks on the road with a child, and no one to help you, and no proper linen to be had anywhere south of Lisbon. Mrs. Bracewell's eyes went round the shabby morning room and priced it. And now this great cold house, and a gentleman who never speaks. It is not a life for a young woman, and you will forgive me for saying so, because I have said it to His Grace himself. You are very good. I am not good. I am practical, which is better. She patted the sofa beside her, and Georgiana sat down, because there is a kind of woman one learns more from at close range. Now, I know exactly what everyone has told you about me, and I do not much mind it. I will tell you my own case in 3 sentences, and then we shall have tea like Christians. Please. The child is my late husband's cousin's daughter, and there is no one else on that side but a bachelor of 30 who has not been in a drawing-room these 3 years, and an old lady at Bath. Mrs. Bracewell drew off one glove. She will have money from her mother's people whenever the lawyers have finished eating it, and whoever has her will have the handling of that money. I do not pretend otherwise. I would rather be honest about £180 a year than genteel about it. That is 2 sentences. The third is this. I have kept a household for 26 years and buried a husband and 2 sons, and I know what a girl of 6 needs, which is not a duke. She smiled. It was a real smile, and that was somehow worse. You are wondering why I am telling you the ugly part. I assume you are about to make me an offer. How clever you are. Yes. The glove came off the other hand. £40 a year for your life, paid quarterly through my own attorney, and a place in my house as Colette's governess, if she wishes it, which she will, because she is fond of you. In exchange you will say, when you are asked, exactly one thing, that the marriage at Palermo was spoken of and hoped for, but that you never saw it solemnized. The fire settled. Out in the passage, Tarrant went by with a coal scuttle, walking on his bad knee. I did not see it solemnized, said Georgiana. I was 16 years old, and in England when it was solemnized. There, you see how easy. I have the priest's copy in my hand, and the mother's word in my ear. They say the same thing. I will say it in any room in England you care to put me in. Georgiana stood up. If she is not Lady Colette Stanbury, she is nobody's daughter, and her mother was nobody's wife. You are asking me to trade a dead woman's name for £40 a year. Mrs. Bracewell did not flinch. She looked, for about 3 seconds, extremely tired. You are 22, she said. At 22 I would have said exactly that, in exactly that voice, and I would have been very proud of myself. Do you know what a jointure is, Miss Lanbridge? Mine is £112 a year, and it dies with me. The house I live in is my brother-in-law's. He is 68. When he dies, I shall be a visitor for the rest of my life. She put her gloves back on. A woman without a child is a woman without a reason to be kept. I did not make that rule. I have merely been living under it for 12 years. Then we are both under it, said Georgiana. I am not going to hand her to you so that you can be safe. No, said Mrs. Bracewell, rising, entirely pleasant again. No, I see that you are not. What a pity. I did like you. The letter from Mr. Bramston came on the 4th of March, and it was addressed to the Duke, but Lady Temperance read it out at the breakfast table because Lady Temperance read everything. Its middle paragraph said this, that the memorial of Mrs. Bracewell would be answered in Easter term, that the master would consider the fitness of the household above all things, and that, in the opinion of counsel, it was highly undesirable that the young person from Sicily should be resident at Eagleridge when the matter was heard. Her presence there could be represented in a light which no explanation afterwards would remove. "The young person from Sicily," said Lady Temperance. 12 guineas an hour, and that is his prose. Georgiana put down her cup. The room was suddenly very clear to her. The tarnished coffee pot, the water stain on the ceiling, shaped like Corsica, the child eating bread and butter with both hands. She had known it for a week. She had known it since the passage, and the candle, and the sentence through the door. She simply had not written it on the list yet. "He is right," she said. "He is an attorney. That is not the same as being right. He is right this time." She looked at the Duke, who had not said a word, and who was looking at the letter as though it had been left on his plate by an animal. "Your Grace, I am the strongest thing in that child's life, and I am the weakest thing in your case, and both of those are true on the same morning. I cannot be mended by staying here. You have an agreement," he said, "4 clauses, and a 5th in your hand, which says I may say what I think." She folded her hands to keep them still. "Then I think this. I can do nothing for her at Eagleridge, but be loved by her, which she will survive. I can do a great deal for her in London, where there are shipping registers, and a consular office, and a bookseller who will pay me to keep myself. The paper we need is not in this house. It is in Palermo, and the man who can prove it is somewhere in England, and neither of them will be found by my sitting on that stair with her." The Duke got up and went to the window, with his back to the room. "She will not understand it," he said. "No, she will not. She will think you have gone the way the others went." "Yes," said Georgiana, and her voice went for the first time. "She will." It took 4 days to arrange, and Georgiana used every one of them. She did not lie to the child, because she had decided in a cabin off Sardinia that she would never do that. She sat on the nursery floor with a map of England torn out of an old almanac, and she put her finger on Shropshire and then on London, and she said in French, "I am going here. It is 2 days in a coach. I am going to fetch a paper that says who you are. When I have it, I am coming back on that same road, and nobody in this house will stop me, because I have it in writing." She showed her the agreement with the Duke's signature on it, and let her hold it. Then she took a candle end and marked a calendar on the nursery wall in soft pencil, 1 square for every day. And she said, "Mrs. Cobbold will cross one off every night with you. When you have crossed off this many," she drew a heavy line, "you may begin to look out of the window." Colette said nothing. She had not said anything for 132 days. But she took the pencil and made a mark of her own beside the heavy line, a small, careful cross, and Georgiana had to go out to the passage for a moment before she could come back in. They left at 6 on a Monday morning. The Duke was not in the house. He had gone to Wycote at 4 about a lambing shed, which Lady Temperance said was a lie, and Tarrant said nothing, which was the same thing. At the last minute, in the cold court, with the horses stamping, Mrs. Cobbold came out with a small parcel done up in a cloth. "He said to give you it at the gate, and not before," she said, "and I'm sure I don't know why." It was a pair of gloves, lined, and a note, folded once, unsigned. "The Ludlow mail is cold at the front. Sit inside. I have paid the difference." Lady Temperance's house was in Wimpole Street, narrow, immaculate, and colder than Eagleridge, because London cold gets in at the joints of a thing. Georgiana was given a bedroom on the 2nd floor with a writing table in the window. On her first morning, she sat down at it at 6 o'clock, with her ink freezing at the edge of the pot, and began. She wrote 9 letters that week, and she paid for 8 of them herself, to the parish of the Annunziata at Palermo, in Italian, enclosing a copy of the extract, and requesting a certified duplicate under seal, with the fee named honestly and offered in advance, to the office of His Majesty's Consul at Palermo, in English, requesting confirmation that the marriage had been notified, and asking after a clerk named R. Wilkin, who had signed as witness in 1806, to a merchant house in the Via Alloro, in Italian, asking whether Signor Giacomo Riva was living, to the Navy Office, to the Transport Board, to a shipping agent in Wapping, who had 2 of her father's old letters in his hands, all asking the same question in different clothes. Where is the Englishman? She learned that a letter to Sicily took 2 months in a good season, and never came back at all in a bad one. Mr. Quiller's shop stood in a court off Paternoster Row, and the back room of it was where the real business happened. He was a small, dusty man who had bought translations from her father for 20 years. He gave her memoirs to English and a Neapolitan agricultural treatise. "Your father was quicker," he said, on the 2nd week. "My father was 51 and had been at it since he was 19. Give me until August." "I shall give you until Thursday, and 30 shillings. He peered at her over the counter. "There is a Dr. Halbrook in Edinburgh, since you ask. He is getting up a book on the Norman charters of Sicily, and he wants a hand for the Italian and the Latin. Salaried. A year certain, perhaps 2. He asked me for a man. And you thought of me. I thought of your father, and then I thought of you, which is how these things go." Quiller wrapped her parcel in the day before yesterday's newspaper. "The name goes on the title page, mind. Translated by, and then the name. He is particular about it." Georgiana walked back to Wimpole Street with the parcel under her arm, and did not let herself think about a name on a title page until she was past the turning at Cavendish Square. Then she let herself think about it for the length of one street, which was as much as she considered safe. Her days took a shape, and the shape had iron in it. 6 until 9, her own translating. 10 until 1, Mr. Bramston's chambers, where she copied and construed, and was told twice a week that she must on no account appear anywhere near the master's rooms. 2 until 5, the shipping offices, the Navy Office, the consular clerks, all the patient wearing places where an Englishman might have left a mark on a page. At 6, she wrote to Eagleridge. She wrote every day, whether or not there was anything in the day worth writing, because the letters were crossed off on a wall. Mrs. Cobbold wrote back once a week, in a hand like a fence in a wind, and a spelling all her own. "The child is well. She wold not eat her egg Monday, but ate it Tuesday. She has crossed of 14. His Grace is at the Ware from dark to dark, and has been 3 times to the nursery door, and not gone in." Georgiana read that sentence a great many times. The letter that turned her round came on the 9th of April, and it was 3 lines long. "The Kilda has not eat since Saturday." She sits at the window. "I do not like to write it, but I am afeard, miss." And Mr. Tarrant says, "Right." She was still holding it when the knocker went at 9 that night. He had ridden. That was the thing she understood first, before anything else. He had ridden from Shropshire in 2 days in April weather. He stood in Lady Temperance's narrow hall with the water coming off his coat onto the tiles, holding his hat like a man delivering a parcel he had been paid to bring. "Your Grace." "She has stopped eating," he said. "I know. I have the letter in my hand. I was going to come by the morning coach." Something in his face let go by about 1/4 of an inch. He looked at the wet floor, and then at the wall. "I have not come to command you," he said. "You have an agreement, and it says a month's notice. And if you tell me you are staying in London, I shall go back tonight and say nothing about it, ever. Sit down before you fall down." He sat on Lady Temperance's hall chair, which had never in its life been used. Georgiana went down to the kitchen herself and came back with bread, cold mutton, and a glass of the porter the cook kept for her own rheumatism. He ate the way soldiers eat, without pleasure and without stopping. "Ask me your question," he said at last. "You have had it in your mouth since I came in." "Very well." She sat down opposite him on the stairs, which was not proper, and neither of them mentioned it. "Do you want her? Or do you only refuse to lose her?" The clock in the hall went on for some time. "When they brought me the notice from the consul," he said, "I read it in the estate room at 4 in the afternoon, and then I went out and looked at a drain for an hour and a half. That is what I did. There was nothing in me at all. I have wondered since whether there is anything in me at all." He turned the glass on his knee. "Then a girl came into my hall with a child asleep on a settle, and the child had my brother's chin. Not his eyes. His chin, and the way he stood when he was being stubborn about something. He stopped. I am not fit for her. I know that better than Mrs. Bracewell knows it. But I want her in that house when she is 30, and I want her to have her father's name on her, and I want to be the man who did not let it be taken. If that is not wanting her, it is the only kind I have." Georgiana looked at her own hands. "That will do," she said. They travelled down together in the mail 2 days later. If the world wished to make something of a duke, an aunt, a maid, and 400 weight of chancery paper in a public coach, said Lady Temperance, the world was welcome. It rained the whole way. Somewhere past Worcester, the Duke fell asleep, sitting up, and his aunt put a shawl over him, with the tenderness of a woman shoeing a cat, and said quietly, "He rode to London and back for you. Do not tell me you did not notice." "He rode for the child, ma'am." "He rode for the child," Lady Temperance agreed. And in February he took a lined pair of gloves off his own dressing table and told the housekeeper to hand them over at the gate, which is a thing men do for children constantly. Colette was at the schoolroom window. She had been at it since the first light, Mrs. Cobbold said, and she came down the stairs so fast that she fell on the last 3, and she did not cry about that either. She came into Georgiana's arms hard enough to knock the breath out of both of them. That night, in the dark, with the candle out, and the rain starting again on the nursery glass, a small voice said, in French very carefully, "You came back on the road, you said. 134 days." Georgiana lay quite still and answered in the same language, because you do not startle a bird that has just come down onto your hand. "I came back on the road," I said. "Tomorrow I will show you which square on the wall it is." April turned into May, and Eagle Ridge began to make an argument for itself. The weir was rebuilt in 10 days with 40 men from 3 parishes, and the water went off the meadow, and what came up out of it was grass. The lambs came. The lime avenue put out its small yellow-green leaves in a week. Colette spoke French to Georgiana, and to no one else, for 12 days. On the 13th, she said bread to Mrs. Cobbold, and was given so much of it that she had to be rescued. The lessons began the week after that, in the library, from 10 until noon, because the library had the good light and the great table, and in that house no other use whatever. They read Perrault, and a book of birds, and a French grammar of 1789, with a previous owner's boredom penciled in the margins. Colette learned her English nouns in threes, and her verbs slowly, and hated them. On the 4th day of it, the Duke came in for a book, and did not go out again. He stood at the end of the table for a while. Then he sat down at the end of the table. He was there the next morning, and the morning after, and by the end of the 2nd week, his chair had a cushion in it that nobody admitted to putting there. He was, it emerged, exceptionally bad at French. Encore, said Colette, with the terrible patience of a 6-year-old teacher. I have said it 4 times. You say it in the nose. It is not in the nose. She looked at Georgiana for support, and did not get it. Encore. Encore, said the Duke of Ambermere in the nose for the 5th time. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Georgiana had begun to keep a private catalogue of what happened at the corner of his mouth, and this one belonged to a class of its own. The almost. They fell into a habit that neither of them named. After the child was asleep, the Duke worked in the estate room, and Georgiana worked in the library. At some point between 9 and 10, one of them would come through the connecting door with a lamp and a question. His questions were about the meaning of Italian phrases in a Genoese banker's letter. Hers were about English words she had learned from books and had never once heard spoken. Culvert, hurdle, cast ewe, glebe. Then the questions stopped being about words. Why did your father go to Sicily? He asked one evening, standing in the doorway with the lamp low. Because he could not get a living in England worth £20, and because a consul wanted a chaplain who could read Greek. She put down her pen. He was very happy there. He was a bad manager of money, and a good man to sit with. He read me the Odyssey in the original when I was 9, and did not once explain a word of it on principle. What principle? That you should be made to want a thing before you are given it. The Duke was quiet for a moment. That is either very wise or the excuse of a man who did not like being interrupted. It was both, said Georgiana. Most things are. The long table in the dining room seated 24, and for 3 years 2 people had sat at either end of it, when there were 2 people at all. In the 2nd week of May, Georgiana asked, as a matter of the child's French, whether they might all sit at one end. The Duke looked down the length of the mahogany. Tarrant, he said, take out 4 leaves. 4, Your Grace? 6. They took out 6. The table came down to something a family might sit at. And Tarrant, carrying the leaves out with his bad knee, looked so nearly cheerful that Mrs. Cobbold had to speak sharply to a housemaid about nothing at all. The east side of the house had 8 shut rooms, and on the 20th of May, the Duke opened one of them. You should see this, he said, since you are keeping the papers. It was a bedroom with the shutters closed, and the furniture under Holland covers, and the particular smell of a room that has been honest about itself for a long time. Dust, old wool, cold soot. He opened one shutter. The light came in a single hard bar across the floor. My brothers, he said, nothing has been moved. I did not give the order. Nobody gave the order. The House simply shut the door in 1804, and has kept it shut. On the dressing table, there was a tin dispatch box with the paint gone at the corners. He put it on the bed and opened it, and inside were letters, tied in a bundle with red tape from the estate room, which is not how a man keeps letters he loves. They had all been opened. 4, he said. From Lisbon, from Malta, from Palermo, from Palermo. The first says he is sorry for what he said to me at our father's funeral. The second says he has met a Frenchwoman. The third says he has married her, that her name is Matilda, that she is gentle and poor, and that our family will make her miserable if he brings her home before he can afford to protect her. He set them down. The fourth says that there is a child, that she is called Colette, and that he would be obliged if I would answer at least one of his letters. Georgiana did not answer him. I was 24, and I had £1,200 and a great deal of pride, and he had been the one who was believed, always, in every quarrel we ever had. Wallace's voice did not change at all, which was how she knew. I meant to answer the fourth one. I remember thinking that I would do it when I could write something that did not sound like begging his pardon. Then my cousin died, and I had this place around my neck. Then the consul's notice came. How long between the fourth letter and the notice? 2 years and 1 month. He closed the box. So you see, Mrs. Bracewell is right about me, and she's only wrong about the reason. I am not an unfit person because I am a bachelor. I am an unfit person because a man wrote to me 4 times, and I did not answer him. And now I am proposing to be trusted with what he left. The bar of light lay between them on the floor. Georgiana thought about the child asleep upstairs, and about a woman in a hot room in Palermo, with her hair stuck to her forehead, dictating in French because she had no English left. There is something I have been keeping until you could bear it, she said. I think you can bear it tonight. She went for the letter. It had travelled sewn into the lining of her cloak, and it was worn along the folds, and it was addressed on the outside in a large, weak hand. À mon frère, que je n'ai jamais vu. To my brother, whom I have never seen. Sit down, Your Grace, said Georgiana. You will not follow it in French, and I will not put it into English badly by reading ahead. I shall read it slowly. He sat down on the edge of his brother's bed. She stood by the shutter for the light, and she read. It said that Matilda Stanbury was dying and knew it, that she was not afraid, and that she was writing while she could still be understood. It said that her husband had spoken of his brother often and always in the same way, that Wallace was the one who would not lie, even when lying would have been kinder to everybody. It said that Alban had never blamed him for the silence, and had said 3 days before he died that he had been the elder and should have written a 5th time. It said that there was money in Marseille, and that money is a poor argument for keeping a child. Then it said the last thing, and Georgiana read it in French first, because she had promised the woman who dictated it that she would read it in French first. Ne la donnez pas à quelqu'un qui la gardera par devoir. Donnez-la à quelqu'un qui la regarde. She lowered the page. Do not give her to someone who will keep her out of duty, she said. Give her to someone who looks at her. The room was very quiet. Somewhere below, a door was closed without violence. Read it again, said the Duke. She read it again. When she had finished, He sat with his hands hanging between his knees, and he did not cover his face, and he did not speak for a length of time she did not measure. She stayed where she was by the shutter. She had learned in Sicily that there is a kind of grief that must not be touched and must not be left alone, and that the only correct thing to do is to remain in the room. At last he said, "Thank you." She dictated it in 3 sittings. "You have carried that in your clothes since October?" "Yes." "Why did you not give it to Craddock in February? He would have put it before the master. It is worth more than the extract." "Because it is not evidence," said Georgiana. "It proves nothing at law. It is a dying woman's opinion of a man she never met. And because I did not know you in February." She folded it along its old folds. "I was not going to let it be read out by an attorney to a room full of men who would decide what it ought to say." He looked up at her then, and the look went on slightly too long, and both of them noticed it. "Miss Lanbridge," he said, "you are the most inconvenient person I have ever had in this house." "Thank you, Your Grace." The trouble came 4 days later, in a letter from Bristol. She had found her Englishman. It had taken 10 weeks, 2 shipping registers, a clerk at the Transport Board with a weakness for Greek, and 20 letters. Robert Wilkin, formerly writing clerk to His Majesty's consul at Palermo, invalided out in 1809, was living in Bristol and keeping the books of a wine importer in Queen Square. He wrote back promptly. He remembered the marriage. He remembered the Englishman with the bad Italian and the French bride. He remembered that the priest had been deaf, and that the whole thing had taken 11 minutes. He would swear to it before any master in England. And then the last paragraph. "I ought to tell you, madam, that a gentleman came down from London in March on behalf of another party in this business. He sat with me 2 hours and was very civil. He put it to me that a man's memory of a foreign ceremony 6 years gone is a frail thing to hang a family on. He said that no one would blame me for owning honestly that I could not now be certain. He left his card and a mention of expenses. I did not take it. But I am 58, madam, and my place here is worth £90 a year, and I would be glad to know that somebody besides myself knows he called." Georgiana put the letter on the table between them in the estate room, and let the Duke read it twice. "That is not law," he said at last. "That is a man being made afraid. It is both. It is usually both." She sat down. "He has not lied. He has told me he was asked to. Whether he holds when there is a room of gentlemen looking at him is another question, and Mrs. Bracewell's attorney is counting on the answer." Wallace stood up and went to the window, in the way he had. Beyond it the light was going off the hill, and the new grass in the meadow was the colour of a coin. "Bramston writes that the matter is set down for the 26th of June, he said. "He writes something else as well, in the last paragraph, where he puts the things he thinks I will not like. I can guess it. Then I shall say it, since it is my turn to say a thing plainly." He turned round. "He advises again that the surest course before the master is a married household. And I am going to ask you, Miss Lanbridge, because you would find out that I had not asked you, and I would rather be refused than managed." Georgiana felt the room go very still and very far away. "Ask then," she said. "Marry me." It answers the whole of her memorial in one line. The child keeps her name. You keep her. I keep both of you within reach of a roof that does not leak in more than 4 places. He was speaking quickly for him, which meant 3 sentences without a pause. You would have the management of the house and your own money, and no interference with your work. It is a remedy. I am aware of what it is. There it was, she thought. A remedy. No, said Georgiana. He did not move. I am obliged to you, she said, and her voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. I know what it costs you to offer it, and I know it is meant honourably, and I know that 9 women in 10 in my position would take it before you had finished the sentence. That is exactly why I will not. She stood up because she could not say the rest sitting down. In February, I came into this house as a person with no name in it. You gave me one on a sheet of paper, and I have earned it in 4 months. If I marry you in June, then everything I do for that child afterwards will have been done by a duchess got up for the occasion. Everybody in England will know how she came to be one, including her, when she is old enough to count. That is her advantage, not yours. It is not her advantage to grow up knowing that the woman who raised her was married in a hurry to answer a memorial. Her hands were quite steady. She was proud of that afterwards. And I will not be a document, Your Grace. I have spent 5 months proving that a piece of paper can decide what a person is. I will not become one to save her. The silence went on for 4 seconds. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very well, said the Duke of Ambermere. That was all. He picked up the Bristol letter, put it with the others, and said that he would write to Bramston in the morning, and that they would go up to London on the 15th. Then he wished her good night, and went out, and closed the door without violence. Georgiana sat down in the estate room by herself for a long time. She had said no to a duke. She had said it for good reasons, every one of which she still believed at midnight when she was brushing out her hair, and underneath the good reasons, unbudged, sat the sentence she had heard through a door at 10 o'clock at night in February, which she had never once repeated to a living soul. I'd rather be ruined than marry her. Well, she thought, now neither of us need be. London in the 3rd week of June was hot, and smelled of it. They took a house in Half Moon Street, because Lady Temperance's own was let until September. The child had a room at the back that looked into a plane tree, and named the tree in 3 languages before dinner. Mr. Bramston came at 10 the next morning with his clerk and his boxes, and his bad news arranged in order of size. The certified extract from Palermo had not come. It might come in July. It might have gone down with the packet lost off Ushant in April. It might be sitting in a consular office behind a locked door, because the man with the key had died of the fever. Mr. Bramston's opinion, delivered with the sorrow of a man who is paid whatever happens, was that they must go before the master on the 26th with what they had. What they had was a copy without a seal, a Frenchwoman's dictated letter, and a wine merchant's bookkeeper in Bristol. Mr. Wilkin comes up on Monday, said Georgiana. I have written to him 3 times. He will lodge at his employer's house in the city, and he will attend the master on Wednesday. He will be examined by Mrs. Bracewell's counsel, said Bramston. You understand what will be done to him. He will be asked whether he is quite certain, after 6 years, in a foreign country, in a language he did not speak, at a ceremony that took 11 minutes. Georgiana had thought about very little else on the road from Shropshire. And he will be reminded, kindly, that no one blames an honest man for owning that his memory is not what it was. Just so. Then he must have his memory returned to him before Wednesday, she said, by somebody who was there. You were not there, Miss Lanbridge. No, but I have the register entry, and the names of the streets, and the fact that the priest was deaf, and the name of the merchant who signed above him. She was writing while she spoke. A man does not doubt what he remembers when the room around the memory is put back. There was a second piece of business that morning, and it came in an unimportant-looking cover from Edinburgh. Dr. Halbrook wrote formally and well. He had seen her sample of the Palermo charters. He required a translator for 2 years certain, at £120 a year, with lodging found in a respectable house in the new town. The title page would carry her name, in the form she chose. He begged she would not be missish about it, having no patience with anonymity in scholarship. Georgiana read it 4 times, folded it, and put it in the pocket of her gown, where it stayed for 8 days. The rumour was already in London when they arrived. It had gone up ahead of them, like smoke off a chimney. It was never said outright, and that was the art of it. What was said was that the Duke of Ambermere had brought a child home from Sicily, and had brought a young woman with her, and that the young woman had been living at Eagleridge since February. The child, people added, was to be made a lady by an order of the court, which was a very convenient way of arranging matters. And how affecting it all was. Lady Temperance came home on the 3rd day with 2 invitations withdrawn and 1 card returned, and sat down in the hall without taking off her bonnet. "Well," she said, "now we know the shape of it. Is it Mrs. Bracewell?" She has not said 1 word. She would not soil her mouth. The old woman's eyes were very bright and very cold. She has been asked 20 times in 20 drawing-rooms. Every time she has looked down at her hands and said that she would rather not speak of it, and that the child is not to be blamed for anything. That is how it is done, my dear. You do not tell a lie in London. You decline beautifully to deny one. Then we should stay in this house until the 26th. We should do nothing of the kind. Lady Temperance took off her bonnet at last. We are going to Lady Trencham's on Midsummer Night, all 3 of us, and we are going to stand in the middle of the room. Trencham House on the 24th of June had 600 candles in it, and about half that number of guests, and the heat came off the staircase like the open door of an oven. Georgiana wore grey silk, because she had 1 gown fit for it, and it was grey. A woman who is being talked about, said Lady Temperance, should never on any account wear a colour that can be described afterwards. She came in behind the old woman, with her gloved hands loose at her sides. She had crossed the Straits of Messina in a fishing boat with a sick child and 40 pounds of paper. She could cross a ballroom. The room did what rooms do. It did not stop. It dipped. There was a small dropping away of sound at the top of the stairs, and then a rising of it, warmer than before, which is the sound of a great many people deciding to look somewhere else. The Duke was there before them, which she had not expected, and he did the one thing she had not thought him capable of. He crossed the room in front of everybody and offered his arm to his aunt. And then he said, quite audibly, in his flat, unhurried voice, "Lady Trencham, may I present Miss Lanbridge, who has charge of my brother's daughter." "My brother's daughter?" 4 words, laid down like a paving stone. "Charmed," said Lady Trencham, who was 70 and afraid of nobody. "Miss Lanbridge, they tell me you brought that child from Sicily by yourself. You will sit by me at supper and tell me how, and I shall be very rude to anybody who interrupts us." For an hour it was almost pleasant. Then, at 10:30, in the supper-room, Mrs. Ophelia Bracewell came in on the arm of Master Rousel of the Court of Chancery, and the evening turned over. She looked well. She looked, in fact, better than anyone else in the room, in grey lilac and good pearls. Georgiana watched her come, and understood, the way one understands weather, that it was going to happen here, in front of 30 people, with the ices melting. "Miss Lanbridge," a hand on the back of her chair, a smile with the whole room in it. "How well you look, and how brave you are to come out. Good evening, ma'am. I have said everywhere that you are not to be blamed. Everywhere. I have said that a young woman alone in a foreign country does what she must." Mrs. Bracewell's voice was pitched exactly right. Not loud, merely clear, in the way that makes a room stop chewing. "But we are among friends here, and there is a question that is being asked behind every fan in London, and I would so much rather it were asked kindly by me than unkindly by somebody else." "Then ask it," said Georgiana. "You have lived 5 months under His Grace's roof." The pause was beautifully judged. "In what character?" Somebody's spoon touched a glass. Master Rousel, who had come in for a plate of chicken and found himself in the middle of his own docket, went entirely still. Georgiana stood up. She did not hurry. She took the folded paper out of her glove, where it had been since 8 o'clock that evening. "A woman going into a room like that," Lady Temperance had said in the carriage, "should carry her weapons where she can reach them." "In this character, ma'am," she said. "It is dated the 9th of February. I wrote it myself, and His Grace signed it in the estate room at Eagleridge before he had had his breakfast. Governess and companion to Lady Colette Stanbury. £30 the year, paid quarterly. A month's notice on either side. My own hours after 7 in the evening, for my own work, which is translating, and for which I am paid 30 shillings a sheet by a bookseller in Paternoster Row, who knew my father." She held it out, level. "Master Rousel, I believe you are to hear this cause on Wednesday. You are very welcome to read it now. So is anybody else in this room." Nobody moved to take it. That is what happens. She had expected it. "My dear," said Mrs. Bracewell gently, "a paper proves only what a paper says." "Yes," said Georgiana. "That has been the whole difficulty from the beginning." And then the Duke of Ambermere put down his glass on the table with a small, definite sound, and every head in the supper-room turned, because he had not said one word in public in London in 3 years. "Since the question is being asked in company," he said, "I will answer the rest of it in company, and then we may all go back to the ices." "Your Grace," began Mrs. Bracewell. "In February, my attorneys told me that the shortest way to defeat your memorial, ma'am, was to marry Miss Lanbridge before the hearing. They put it in 3 letters. My own aunt put it to me at my own table. My butler, who has been in my family 40 years and has never given me an unwise word yet, put it to me on the 12th of February at 10 o'clock at night. He was looking at nobody. He was looking at the middle distance over the heads of the room, the way a man does, who has learned to say difficult things to a horizon. And I told him that I would rather be ruined than marry her. The room made a sound. Georgiana felt the blood go out of her face and did not move a muscle of it. You may tell that anywhere you like. A good many of you will, the Duke went on. But you will tell the whole of it, because I am going to give you the whole of it now, and then you will have no excuse. That young woman carried my brother's child 9 weeks across a continent, with no money, no protection, and no promise from anybody in England that she would be thanked for it. She could have left her at any consulate between Palermo and Lisbon and gone home. She did not. When she arrived, my own man of business offered her 2 guineas and the Ludlow mail. He stopped for a moment. Nobody helped him. A woman does a thing like that for nothing, and the world's answer is to hand her a wedding ring to keep the lawyers quiet. Ruin costs me a house and some land, and I have been ruined once already and found it survivable. But I will not buy a wife with my brother's daughter, and I will not have it said in any room in England that she was married to answer a memorial. He picked up his glass again. That is what I said to my butler. Those were the terms of it. Miss Lanbridge has since refused me on her own account, in May, at some length, and she was right, and it is the only argument I have ever lost with anybody where I was glad of it afterwards. Master Rousel coughed into his chicken. Well, said Lady Trencham, into a silence you could have stood a spoon in, I do not know when I have enjoyed a supper more. Mrs. Bracewell, you are not eating. Georgiana found the small writing-room off the landing at midnight, and Mrs. Bracewell was in it, standing by the window with her fan shut in both hands. She had not been crying. She was too well made for that. She looked, simply, like a woman who has been carrying something heavy for 12 years, and has just been told she may put it down, and finds that her arms will not open. I suppose you have come to be generous, she said. No, ma'am. I came for the air. That is the first honest thing anyone has said to me tonight. Mrs. Bracewell looked out at the square. Do you know what I shall do tomorrow? I shall write 2 lines to my attorney and stop the whole of it, because after that performance, my memorial is not worth the paper, and I know when a thing is over. I have known it before. I am sorry for it. Do not be sorry. Be careful. The fan opened and shut. I meant every word I said to you in February, in that shabby room, with the tea going cold between us. I do know what a girl of 6 needs. I have buried 2 boys who needed it, and I have been shown the door of one house after another very civilly for 12 years, and I thought, when I heard there was a child in the case, I thought, there is a reason for somebody to keep me. Ma'am, you will be a Duchess by Michaelmas, and you will be kind to me in public, and I shall accept it, because a woman in my position accepts things. She put on her glove. But I will not come to the house. I hope you will not press me. There is a difference between being forgiven and being kept, and I have had enough of the first to last me. She went out. Georgiana wrote to her twice that autumn. The answers were 4 lines long, perfectly civil, and closed nothing at all. On the evening of the 25th, she went into the city with Mr. Bramston's clerk to see Robert Wilkin. He was a thin grey man of 58, with ink on his 2nd finger, and he was frightened, and he had prepared a little speech about the frailty of memory, which he began before she had sat down. Mr. Wilkin, said Georgiana, before you say it, may I tell you what the court in the Via Allora was like? He stopped. There was a lemon tree in a tub by the side door, she said, and the paving was that grey stone with the shells in it. The chapel is on the left as you come in from the water. The priest was called Don Ignazio, and he was deaf in the right ear, so that everybody who spoke to him stood on his left, and Englishmen never remembered and had to be turned about by the elbow. Wilkin's mouth opened slightly. There was a merchant who signed above you, Georgiana went on. Riva of the Via Alloro, a big man in a green coat, who kept saying that the English were mad to marry in Lent. April, said Wilkin. It was after Lent. He said it anyway. He said it twice. Yes. He gave the lady his arm out to the street, because the groom had gone off to see about the carriage. And there wasn't a carriage. And they walked. He was not looking at her at all now. He was looking at 1806. She had a straw bonnet with green ribbon, and it was too plain for a wedding, and she didn't care a straw for it. He called her Matilda all through, not Madam, and I remember thinking that was a very forward way to go on, and then thinking, no, they are married now, he may. Georgiana let the silence sit. 11 minutes, said Wilkin at last, quietly. I put it in the day book when I got back. 11 minutes, 2 witnesses, no bells. I can see the page. He took off his spectacles and rubbed them with his handkerchief for rather a long time. I shall not be needing my little speech, madam. The master's chambers on the 26th of June were smaller than she had imagined, and hotter, and smelled of dust and sealing wax. Mrs. Bracewell's memorial had been withdrawn at 9 o'clock that morning in 2 lines, without explanation, exactly as she had promised. It changed less than everyone hoped. The court had the child, and the court would not let her go until it was satisfied who she was. It took 3 hours. Wilkin swore and was examined for 40 minutes by a counsel who had been paid to break him, and found nothing to take hold of. Then the copy extract went up to the bench, and Master Rosal held it sideways to the window, asking the clerk twice whether the mark at the fold was a crease or a correction. The passport was produced. Georgiana was examined for 19 minutes, and answered every question in a flat, clear voice. That included the one about the character in which she had resided at Eagle Ridge, which the counsel put to her twice, and did not enjoy either time. Master Rousel gave his opinion at 2:30, with the window open behind him, and the noise of Chancery Lane coming up. The marriage was held sufficiently proved for the purposes of the petition. The infant was the lawful daughter of Lord Alban Stanbury, deceased, and would be described in the order as Lady Colette Stanbury. His Grace, the Duke of Ambermere, was appointed guardian of her person, and the court, said Master Rousel dryly, saw no reason to disturb an arrangement which had plainly answered so well, and directed that the infant remain under the immediate care of Miss Georgiana Lanbridge. Of the property in Marseille, there was, in the end, very little. The war had eaten most of it. The lawyers of 2 countries had eaten a good deal of what the war left. What came to the child at last was £38 a year, and a house in a street that no longer existed. Good, said the Duke, in the passage outside, putting on his hat. Good, Your Grace. Nobody will ever be able to say it was worth having, he said. Come, she will be at the window. They went home to Shropshire in the first week of July. and the country was at the height of itself. The hay was down in the meadow the weir had drowned. The lime avenue was in flower, and the whole front of the house smelled of it for a fortnight, so that even Tarrant remarked on it. Colette learned to swim in the mill pool, badly and with enormous confidence. On the 14th of July, in the evening, the Duke asked her to walk down to the water with him. They stood on the new stonework of the weir, with the light going long and yellow across the field. She had the Edinburgh letter in her pocket. She had carried it for 3 weeks, and she had answered it that morning, and she had not told anybody what she had written. "I have something to say to you," she said, "before you say whatever it is you have brought me down here to say." "Then say it." "Dr. Halbrook of Edinburgh has offered me 2 years certain at £120, with lodging, and my name on the title page of 3 volumes. She watched the water go over. "You should know that I could go. I am not a woman who has nowhere to go. That has not been true of me since the 9th of February, and it was made true by a man who signed a paper before his breakfast, without asking anybody's advice." "I know it," said Wallace. "I have known it since May, when you refused me. That is why I have waited 7 weeks. And then the Duke of Ambermere, who had been ruined once, and rebuilt a weir with his own hands, and buried a brother he never answered, went down on one knee on wet stone in his good coat. 'Georgiana,' he said. It was the first time. She felt it go through her like cold water. I have practiced this for a month with a 6-year-old, and she has been merciless, and I am still going to do it in the nose." He took a breath. "Voulez-vous m'épouser? Non pas pour l'enfant, non pas pour la cour, pour moi. Will you marry me? Not for the child, not for the court, for me." The accent was frightful. The verb was wrong in the second sentence. Somewhere behind them, at a nursery window, she did not turn round to look at. A small person was almost certainly standing on a chair. "Say the last part again," said Georgiana. "Pour moi." She knelt down on the stone in front of him, which no woman in Shropshire had ever done in a good gown, and took his face in both hands. "Yes," she said, in English, so there can be no argument about the grammar. "Yes." She told him afterwards, walking back up the field in the dark, what she had written to Edinburgh that morning, that she would do the 3 volumes, and do them from Shropshire, and that Dr. Halbrook might have her at £80 a year, and her name on the page. Or he might find a man in the new town who could read Norman Latin as well as she could, and she wished him joy of the search. Dr. Halbrook, who was not a fool, wrote back by return and agreed to everything. And in the field, before they came in sight of the house, she told him the other thing. "On the 12th of February, I came down for the child's milk at 10 o'clock at night," she said. "Your study door stood open a hand's breadth. I heard exactly 9 words of you, and then I went back up the stairs." He stopped walking. 5 months, he said. 5 months. "And you stayed?" "I stayed for her," said Georgiana. "I am marrying you for you. I should like the 2 things kept in the right order for the rest of our lives, if you please." He said nothing at all to that, which by then she could read as easily as French. They were married at Wycote in September, very quietly, with 14 people, and Tarrant crying openly at the back in a way that nobody was so ill-bred as to mention. A year later, on a hot morning in June, the doors of the stone hall at Eagleridge stood open at both ends, front and kitchen court. The air went straight through the house. The whole place smelled of lime flower and cut grass. Georgiana came in out of the sun with a parcel from Edinburgh under her arm. She stopped in the middle of the hall, because she still did, most days. She had stood on that same flag, with her bonnet on and mud to the knee of her petticoat, being told that a carriage was ordered for 9. The settle was still by the hearth. There were 2 dolls on it now, and a slate, and a half-eaten apple that somebody was going to be spoken to about. Upstairs in the old nursery, the pencil calendar was still on the wall. Nobody had ever washed it off. Colette was 7, and read English better than she spoke it, and her French came back all at once when she was tired or delighted. She was at that moment on the stairs, shouting for her uncle in 2 languages, because she had been promised the mill pool and the morning was going to waste. Wallace came through from the estate room, with the child already climbing him. From Scotland? The first volume. Georgiana cut the string. The binding was blue, and the paper was better than she had expected, and on the title page, under the long Latin title, it said, "Translated from the Italian and the Latin by Georgiana Stanbury, Duchess of Ambermere." She looked at it for a moment. Then she handed it to her husband and went to find her bonnet, because a promise about a mill pool is a promise. The tin box lived in the library now, on the shelf where the light came in. 4 letters from a man who wrote 5 times if you counted the one his wife dictated. Every year, on the 11th of April, somebody read the 5th one out loud in French and then in English, and nobody in that house ever got through it dry. Do not give her to someone who will keep her out of duty. Give her to someone who looks at her. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her the whole way across the hall, from the moment she came in out of the sun. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.